The curse of the crimson tide. The Caribbean sun cast a golden glow over the horizon as Captain Elias Blackthorne stood at the helm of his ship, the Crimson Tide. He was a man of legend, known for his cunning, his ferocity in battle, and his unwavering quest for freedom on the high seas. But as the wind shifted and dark clouds gathered, an omen loomed, a storm not of nature but of fate. The crew exchanged uneasy glances, knowing well that their captain was fearless. But even the boldest sailor knew better than to ignore the signs of an ill-fated journey. In a secluded tavern in Port Royal, a mysterious woman draped in a tattered cloak whispered of an ancient curse that had befallen the sea. Elias and his crew listened as she spoke of an island lost to time, its treasures protected by the vengeful spirits of the damned. A map, aged and frayed, was placed before him. The lure of untold riches was undeniable, but so was the peril. Rumors of ships vanishing near its shores, sailors driven mad, and whispers in the wind all painted a grim picture. Yet fortune favored the bold, and Elias was nothing if not daring. As the Crimson Tide set sail toward the uncharted island, tensions brewed among the crew. Elias's first mate, Marcus Kane, harbored ambitions beyond loyalty, and whispers of mutiny spread through the lower decks like wildfire. But Elias was no fool. He had seen treachery before and would not be so easily deceived. He watched Kane closely, waiting for the right moment to act. Little did he know that Kane had already begun enlisting supporters, promising untold wealth to any who turned against their captain. Navigating through treacherous waters, the crew encountered eerie signs. A ghostly ship adrift with no living soul aboard, strange symbols carved into floating driftwood, and the haunting cries of the wind. Each step forward into the unknown sent shivers through even the bravest men aboard. Some begged Elias to turn back, but his resolve remained firm. The island was close, its promise of fortune too great to ignore. Then, on the third night, a dense fog enveloped them, and shadows moved just beyond the reach of their lanterns. When at last they reached the island, the sight before them was unlike anything seen before. Towering cliffs lined with skeletal remains stood as a grim warning, and the air itself seemed thick with whispers of the dead. As they ventured deeper, ruins of an ancient civilization loomed, their stories carved in stone, their fate sealed by time. Strange markings, written in a language unknown to even the most seasoned scholars, hinted at a great catastrophe. Elias felt the weight of history pressing down on him, but he pressed forward, determined to claim his prize. No treasure comes without a price. As Elias and his crew unearthed a golden idol encrusted with emeralds, the island trembled, and the spirits of long-forgotten warriors rose from their graves. The dead did not take kindly to the living's intrusion, and battle erupted beneath the blood-red moon. The once still air became filled with the sound of clashing blades and the screams of the fallen. The crew fought valiantly, but the spirits seemed endless, their rage eternal. As chaos ensued, Marcus Kane seized his moment, striking Elias down and claiming the idol for himself. But greed has a way of consuming its bearer. The moment his hands grasped the cursed relic, the spirits turned their fury upon him. His cries echoed through the jungle as his soul was claimed by the very forces he sought to defy. Elias, battered and wounded, knew that they had to leave the island before it was too late. With time running out and the island collapsing into the sea, Elias and his remaining crew fought to escape the grip of the vengeful spirits. Through fire and darkness, they raced toward the Crimson Tide, the ghosts of the damned clawing at their heels. The ship itself seemed alive, straining against the waves as if it too sought to flee the wrath of the island. The men barely made it aboard before the shore crumbled into the abyss, swallowing the ruins forever. Upon reaching the ship, their troubles were far from over. The storm, now a swirling vortex of unnatural force, threatened to swallow them whole. As if summoned by the curse itself, a monstrous sea serpent emerged, its eyes glowing with an ancient hunger. Elias, wounded but unbroken, took the helm, leading his men in one final battle for survival. The fight was brutal, each man giving his all, knowing that death was the only other alternative. With a final desperate maneuver, Elias sent the beast crashing beneath the waves. As dawn broke, the Crimson Tide emerged from the storm, battered but afloat. The cursed island had vanished beneath the waves, and with it the dark whispers of the past. Elias Blackthorne had defied fate itself, but he knew that legends never truly rest. The sea still had many stories left to tell, and he was determined to write them in blood and gold. His men, weary yet victorious, drank to their survival, knowing that the world would never forget the legend of the Crimson Tide. Thus, the legend of the curse of the Crimson Tide was born, whispered in every tavern, sung in every port, and carried upon the wind as long as the sea remained wild and free. But some say, when the night is darkest and the waves are still, the spirits of the island still call out, waiting for the next fool to seek their fortune. Part 2. The Ghosts of the Deep. The Crimson Tide may have survived the storm, but the sea was not yet ready to let Captain Elias Blackthorne rest. As the ship sailed into calmer waters, a dense fog settled over them, swallowing the horizon. The men spoke in hushed tones, wary of what lay beyond the mist. Elias stood firm at the helm, gripping the wheel with a steady hand, his mind lingering on the legend of the lost island. The air was heavy with unease, the usual chatter among the crew reduced to murmurs. Every creak of the ship's hull sounded louder, every splash of the waves more ominous. Something was out there, lurking just beyond sight. A silhouette emerged in the distance, a ship unlike any they had seen before. Its tattered black sails billowed without wind, and its hull groaned as though alive. The crew exchanged uneasy glances as they realized the ship was approaching them without any sign of life aboard. "A ghost ship," whispered one of the men. "The sea won't let us go so easily." The ship drew closer, silent as death itself. The Crimson Tide shuddered as though it could sense the unnatural force bearing down upon it. Elias signaled for silence, his eyes locked on the spectral vessel. The mist thickened around them, coiling through the rigging and seeping across the deck like a living thing. Shadows moved within the fog, the whisper of ancient voices lost to time. As the vessel came alongside the Crimson Tide, a figure emerged from the mist. A captain in dark, weathered garb, with eyes like glowing embers. He spoke with a voice that echoed through the very air. "Elias Blackthorne, you have stolen from the dead," he intoned. "Return what is ours, or suffer the fate of all who defy the spirits of the deep." Elias felt a chill creep down his spine, but he refused to yield. "Your treasure was lost to time. I took nothing but what the sea allowed," he replied. The ghostly captain merely laughed, his voice laced with something more chilling than the cold sea air. The crew screamed as ghostly hands reached from the water, grasping at the hull, dragging the Crimson Tide into a maelstrom of haunted waves. The ship groaned and pitched violently, the ocean itself rebelling against them. The air turned bitter cold as the spirits climbed aboard, their hollow eyes burning with malice. The crew fought, but their swords met nothing but air. Elias shouted orders, but his voice barely carried above the unnatural wailing of the ghosts. The Crimson Tide was being pulled under, its fate entwined with the sins of the past. Elias had faced death before, but this was something beyond mortal peril. The ghostly captain loomed before him, watching with a knowing smirk. "There is no escape, Blackthorne," he whispered. "The sea claims its own." As the ship threatened to break apart, Elias made a desperate choice. He called out to the spirits, demanding parley. The ghostly captain relented, offering a single choice: return the idol to the sea and break the curse, or fight for his freedom and risk eternal damnation. Elias knew there was no true escape from destiny, only a delaying of fate. His fingers clenched into a fist, but he knew what had to be done. He strode toward the hold, where the idol lay wrapped in cloth. The golden artifact pulsed with a malevolent energy, almost as though it resisted him. He yanked it free and marched back to the deck. The sea churned violently, waves cresting unnaturally high, waiting for the relic's return. With a heavy heart, Elias raised the idol above his head, then cast it into the swirling abyss. The water calmed almost instantly, and the ghostly ship began to fade into mist. The spirits had been appeased, for now. The moment the idol vanished, the spectres released their hold on the Crimson Tide, retreating into the fog like a bad dream. Silence settled over the ship, broken only by the labored breathing of the crew. As the fog lifted and the sea returned to its usual rhythm, the crew breathed sighs of relief. But Elias knew that a price had been paid. Marcus Kane had been taken, his greed sealing his fate in the depths. And though the spirits had retreated, the knowledge of what lurked beneath the waves remained. The men whispered among themselves, their gazes darting to the dark waters below. The crimson tide sailed onward, its crew battered but alive. Tales of their encounter spread across the Caribbean, whispered in hushed tones in every port. And while Elias Blackthorne had won his battle against the dead, he knew that the sea had not yet finished writing his story. The curse may have been broken, but the ghosts of the deep would always remember his name. Some say the ghost ship still roams the waters on fog-laden nights, searching for those who dare to take what is not theirs. Others claim that Captain Elias Blackthorne remains haunted by the echoes of that night, forever bound to the sea, always looking over his shoulder for the ghosts that once nearly claimed him. But one thing remains certain: the legend of the curse of the Crimson Tide is far from over. Thus the legend continued, not as a tale of treasure, but as a warning. Some riches are meant to remain untouched, and some fates can never be escaped. And those who sail too close to the mist, those who hear the whispers of the deep, know better than to tempt the wrath of the sea's forgotten dead. Part 3. The Eternal Pursuit. The Crimson Tide had escaped the clutches of the haunted sea, but Elias Blackthorne knew the curse had merely loosened its grip, not vanished entirely. The sea remained restless beneath them, the air thick with something unseen yet palpable. His men, weary and battle-hardened, worked in grim silence, avoiding the waters as if fearing something would reach out and pull them under. The whispers of the dead still clung to the mist, murmuring through the waves like ghostly echoes. Elias stood at the helm, his mind racing with the events that had transpired. He had faced the dead, bargained with spirits, and defied the will of the ocean itself. But fate had a cruel sense of humor. The legend of the Crimson Tide was growing, and with it came a new threat. Not of spirits, but of men. The weight of the relics still lingered, an invisible shackle binding him to the sea. In the dark waters off Tortuga, a fleet of ships gathered under a banner Elias knew all too well: the Royal Navy. Led by the relentless Captain William Harcourt, a man known for his ruthless pursuit of pirates, the fleet had but one goal: to end Elias Blackthorne once and for all. Rumors of the Crimson Tide's spectral encounter had reached Harcourt's ears, and he saw it as an opportunity to destroy Elias, using the tale of ghosts to strike fear into those who would defend him. Elias's legend had grown too large, his survival an insult to the empire he had spent years defying. The bounty on his head had doubled, drawing mercenaries and bounty hunters into the chase, all eager for their share of the reward. A warning reached the Crimson Tide from an old ally in Port Royal. A single message scrawled on parchment: "They come, run or fight." Elias weighed his options. He could attempt to slip away under cover of night, sailing for waters less hostile. But his pride refused to let him flee without a fight. The Crimson Tide was more than a ship. It was a symbol of freedom, of defiance. To run would be to surrender the legend that kept his crew fighting. The decision was made. They would stand and fight. The Royal Navy pursued them through treacherous waters, cornering them near Black Reef, a jagged collection of rocks that could be as deadly as enemy cannons. Harcourt's fleet outnumbered them 3-1, but Elias had the advantage of knowing these waters well. As dawn broke, the battle erupted. Cannon fire shattered the stillness of the morning, the roar of destruction echoing across the sea. The Crimson Tide weaved through the reef, using its smaller size and superior speed to its advantage. Harcourt's men struggled to maneuver, their larger ships smashing against the hidden dangers beneath the waves. But even with their cunning, Elias and his men were badly outgunned. One of their masts was splintered by a well-placed shot, and the deck was awash with smoke and fire. The battle was slipping from their grasp. With no other options, Elias made a desperate gamble. He reached for the one thing he swore he would never touch again: the relic he had cast into the sea. A piece of it had remained, a fragment of the curse still bound to the Crimson Tide. As he gripped it, he whispered an ancient incantation, words he barely understood. The ocean answered. A deep rumble shook the sea. From the depths, shadows twisted and rose. The spirits of the deep called once more. Spectral shapes emerged in the mist, their hollow eyes turning toward the battle. The dead had returned, not as enemies, but as allies. Their ghostly forms shimmered in the breaking dawn, their weapons glowing with an eerie light. The spectral crew, those who had once tried to drag Elias to the depths, now turned their wrath upon Harcourt's fleet. Ghostly hands reached through the mist, pulling men into the abyss. Ships cracked and splintered as the ocean itself rebelled against the Empire's grasp. Elias's crew, though shaken, seized the opportunity. They rallied, boarding enemy ships, cutting down those who dared resist. The crimson tide became a spectre itself, disappearing and reappearing in the mist, striking fear into the hearts of their foes. The battlefield became a swirling chaos of steel, flame, and phantoms, the ocean itself coming alive with unnatural force. Harcourt, undeterred, boarded Elias's ship himself. The two men faced each other on the burning deck, their swords flashing in the eerie light. Harcourt was a skilled swordsman, his attacks relentless, but Elias fought with something stronger, purpose. The sea had chosen him, and he would not yield. Steel clashed, sparks flying as the ship groaned beneath them. The battle around them raged, but to Elias, only Harcourt mattered. With a final strike, he disarmed the naval captain, sending his blade overboard. Harcourt, defiant to the end, spat a curse before Elias ran him through. As Harcourt's body fell, the spirits receded. The battle was won. But the sea never gives without taking in return. But victory came at a cost. Many of Elias's men had fallen, and the crimson tide bore heavy scars. The relic, though used to turn the tide, had not freed them. It had bound them further to the will of the ocean. The spirits would come again, and Elias knew his fate was tied to the sea in ways he had never imagined. The whispers of the drowned grew louder, their unseen hands reaching for him in his dreams. With Harcourt dead and the fleet shattered, Elias and his crew sailed into legend. The crimson tide vanished into the mist, its captain forever pursued by both the living and the dead. His name became a whispered warning, a ghost story told in hushed tones in every port. Some say he still sails, forever cursed, forever defiant. Others claim he was swallowed by the sea, his debt finally paid. But one thing is certain, the legend of Elias Blackthorne, the captain who defied death itself, will never be forgotten. And so the crimson tide sails on, its black sails fading into the horizon, where the line between the living and the dead blurs, and where only those brave enough to seek their own destiny dare to follow. The sea, forever watching, forever waiting, whispers his name in the crashing waves, daring another soul to test the depths of fate.